I'm Victor Boyage, and I lead our venture technology practice globally. Dentons is a global law firm, the largest law firm actually in the world. In addition to law, we're focused on strategic and finance, and we spend a lot of time with CVCs and really enjoy doing it. I'm here with a lot of my partners. I'm excited to see them here from Berlin, Munich, London, Amsterdam, and in Singapore and Sao Paulo. So it really reflects the global nature of this organization as well. We're glad to, again, be partners with you all. Joining me on our panel today, I'm going to start with, and maybe I'll ask you guys to introduce yourselves. So Clayton, why don't you start? Clayton Williams from In-Q-Tel, and we'll come down to Ali Perez.
Sure. I'm Clayton Williams. I'm the managing director of In-Q-Tel's London office. So I'm responsible for investments across Europe, Middle East, and Africa for the organization. In-Q-Tel, if you're not aware, was founded 26 years ago by the CIA in the US. And so we strategically invest on behalf of the US intelligence community and Department of Defense. But also 8 years ago, we founded a London office, brought on the UK government, and founded a Sydney office, and brought on the Australian government as well. So 3 governments, about 3 dozen agencies that we support strategically.
Ali?
Ali Perez. I am part of Lockheed Martin Ventures. I am a senior investment manager there. We are a $400 million evergreen fund. We operate off balance sheet and invest across 14 different technology domains, all of which are listed in the United States National Defense Strategy. And so the way we are structured is we kind of are cross responsible for business areas along with technology domains. I personally handle our advanced materials, biotech, and space investments.
Great. And we wanted to have this panel focus on defense and national security, and I think it's totally relevant to other sectors that you may be involved in. Lessons learned, how you source deals, challenges, et cetera. It just so happens we are going to focus on this one particular sector. There's a lot going on these days. If you read the paper, we're implicated every single day, if you will. Clayton, a question out to you to start, and then Ali will just jump in and we'll kind of weave a nice conversation over the next 30 minutes. So where do you see this sector going? Right, defense, national security, tech innovation. We see a lot. I mean, I'm fascinated, besides some of the struggles with what we're seeing from a moral, political perspective in Ukraine. Just the innovation around warfare has been just phenomenally interesting to me. So just flip it over to you, and then we'll weave a nice kickoff here.
Yeah, sure. I think where is it going? I think there's a very clear asymmetry in commercial off-the-shelf technology that's available, that was commercial and is now being applied to military action. And that's not going away, and I think it fundamentally changes how governments need to respond to that threat. And so you kind of see, I kind of separate it into 2 camps. There's innovation that you discussed, which I think is really just taking stuff, drone parts, components, communication devices off the shelf, patching them together and delivering them to some kinetic effect. And that's interesting, but that's separate from invention, which is traditionally what we used to do maybe 10 years ago, where you're trying to find some new material, or you're trying to find some asymmetric component to drive that advantage. So it's kind of these 2 different things, whether you need something immediately now, which is more of an industrial scale-up exercise, or whether you're looking 5-10 years out for the things like quantum computing that will provide an asymmetric advantage in being able to understand communication. So there's this kind of cat and mouse on focus as to what is defense tech. We're also seeing a big shift here in Europe as to what is dual use and what isn't dual use. A lot of that's definitional in terms of what you can invest in and what you can't invest in, but I think people are losing the plot a little bit when they're looking for pure military technology, because the dual use aspects has always been a very important piece for what In-Q-Tel looks for in investments, because a lot of the time the commercial market is your venture scaling opportunity. So
and that's been going on for quite a while. I mean, if you go back 25 years with Israel, dual use was core to the model. Military to commercial utilization, and then coming over to the States where you have a big market, let alone also Europe. Let me just come to you, Ali. I mean, it's like just, again, trying to understand what exactly is defense tech. You mentioned in your portfolio that it's bio.
Yeah.
Like, talk to us about that a little. Because a lot of folks don't think about bio or life sciences in military defense.
Yeah. So I think, defense tech in general, what we consider it is there a government request to use a certain type of technology? And is that a foundational technology, not necessarily a product line? And so we are deep tech investors. And when I talk about bio investing, we really use that in the context of advanced materials. And so bio has so many different applications to that type of technology. And most people think of it as medical, right? Medical innovation, pharmaceuticals, things like that. We think of it in terms of, can you use either brownfield manufacturing to turn it into fermentation plants. We look at different types of material development and fermentation, and we also look at different types of biosurveillance, which is really interesting. And so we use bio in a number of different aspects that are not medically related at all.
So, Clayton, on the medical side, do you guys find that of interest? Are you investing in that subsector?
Yeah, we also have a fairly large biotechnology practice, and that can be anything from field medicine. In Ukraine, for example, it's very hard to pull people from the front line, and so if you can keep someone, stable for longer, that's an incredible impact. But synthetic biology is something we spend a lot of time. Biomanufacturing spend a lot of time. Even things that you think of like the Arab Spring was really a food crisis. So if you can, ensure better quality food, better access to food, you can avoid some of these kind of challenges that become intelligence community problems.
So it begs a question, actually, for both of you, as I'm listening to the answers here. How do you, I don't know, maybe, and I think this would be very relevant for our audience, how are you developing the core expertise to hit all these different niches? I mean, you've got a broad range from, satellites, you've got drone technology, telecom relates to some of those. We just talked about bio. I mean, you have individuals back at this shop who are subject matter experts, or no, you're the subject matter expert, or perhaps you just rely on other investors that are already in the syndicate. How are you doing that? And Ali, maybe I'll start with you and then flip over to Clayton.
Yeah, so I think we're very fortunate. Lockheed Martin is a 130,000 person company. We have 65,000 engineers. And so we have just a deep bench of expertise in probably anything you can come up with. We have a fellows network, which are experts in their field who have been in the defense field for 20 plus years, and they become very niche experts in anything you can think of. Additionally, our team is really, I think, fairly unique. All of us have technical backgrounds. So I have a PhD in neuroscience, I'm on the bio side. And so when deals come through our pipeline, I take a first look at it just to make sure it's not, breaking the laws of physics or, complete vaporware. And then we'll pull in a subject matter expert. And so we're very fortunate to have technical expertise both on the team and a deep bench within Lockheed.
Okay, so now I don't think you guys have 150,000 people.
200.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, much different.
200, period.
Yeah.
Right, not 1,000.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so I guess the unfair advantage that In-Q-Tel has is we're not for profit. So when we have exits like Palantir, we're able to have a very extensive back of house. So of those 200 employees, 30 of them are focused on tech diligence, and they're PhDs or specialists in whatever field. And they look at our investments globally, but they also work very closely with our LPs, the government agencies that we support, because alongside about half of our investments comes this actually NRE development program where you work very closely with customers on their problems and challenges. And so we have deep bench of expertise, but our customers have been doing these things and trying to solve these problems for decades. So that's pretty good. But the other thing is, we make that expertise and that opinion available to our syndicate partners. So we're a small team, particularly here in Europe, and so we rely on the syndicate of co-investors to come to us and say, hey, will you have a look at this really interesting technology? And so they kind of help us pre-filter and scout things as well.
Is it the same rough set of syndicate partners, set of 25 that you deal with all the time, or is it a broader mix?
Yeah, well, it's gotten a bit interesting. Events like this were so incredibly important for In-Q-Tel because military technology was not an area that we had syndicate partners for a very long time. So our companies are not financially attractive, in a lot of cases to pure financial SaaS-based enterprise software VCs. So strategic investors, co-investors have been largely our syndicate in the past. Now it's a bit different. We have a lot of aspirational and companies that have actually started funds directly in kind of our sweet spot, which is this military intelligence, government tech. So it's changing a bit, or the tent's getting larger, I would say.
And does it work the opposite, where you're out in market, you find a technology, and then you want to wrap it with a financial player or two in a syndicate? Do you build a syndicate, or are you usually brought into it?
Yeah, if we're really passionate about a company and we believe there's tremendous upside, and they're having trouble raising, that's when we'll go in. But we do a lot of investments, and we're a minority investor. So functionally, if I'm driving that activity, it should be rare because that's not our role to play. But certainly in circumstances we do.
So I do want to, and most of this is unrehearsed. We did talk, but we're not addressing half the stuff we talked about, which is good. We'll get to it. But let's talk about your limiteds for a second that you allude to. Sole Limited here. You've got government, a unique set of limited partners. How do you interrelate with them? And not just in terms of deal sourcing, but in terms of governance.
You want to start?
Yeah, happy to. So for operating off balance sheet, right, we have a very strong strategic pool. And so all of our deals go up through an investment committee that is comprised of our chief ethics officer, our chief technology officer, one of the business area representatives, our CFO. And so we have this really strong group of people taking a look at any company we invest in from all these different lenses. And those champions can then push these companies out to the business areas to work with and have that top-down kind of indication that we need to be working with these portfolio companies.
So it's not coming from the business units?
No. So we don't actually need a purchase order in order to invest in anything. It's great if we have a champion, and oftentimes we will socialize these companies across all of our business areas before we make an investment. And so there is buy-in, but really the directive comes from top down.
Interesting. And just to riff off what I heard from the last panel, one of the last panels, the investment committee, just in terms of vote, is it a unanimous vote, consensus, no vote, majority vote?
It is majority vote. So every once in a while we will have a deal that splits our investment committee, whether it's incredibly strategic and a big risk financially, or obviously financially sound and a big risk strategically. Sometimes we will get that, and that's why we have made up our investment committee of all these different types of expertise. Yeah. And so we get a very well-rounded thesis around a company.
But your CFO, who's risk-oriented, could be in the minority and lose the vote, and you guys plow ahead because it's so strategic.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. Clayton, so just to understand how you manage your limiteds.
Yeah, functionally very similar, and then there's all sorts of nuance. But we have on the IC front, we have an IC with our partners to say, well, there's two types of investments. We can make an investment independent of government, but if they have some sort of activity that they're trying to jointly develop with the companies, that's where we need a lot more buy-in, and that's kind of the business unit buy-in. Our engagements is deep. I think it's very easy to find technology that government would find useful. It's very hard to make sure that technology fits into a workflow that government has, or essentially it has to be so game-changing that they're willing to change their workflow to adopt it. And so we have a team of engineers that try to make that burden not on the government and not on the company, who are both very busy, but to support that kind of transition into government. And we also require our government's partners to have a very clear buy plan. So a lot of times they're very curious about things, or they're excited about piloting something, but they have no plan to adopt it, or they don't have an AWS engineer, on staff to maintain it in the next year. So we require all those things to be in place, or at least a plan to be in place, so that way we're not just building something for a cliff later.
Right. So just to, I want to underscore a couple points that you just mentioned. Are you walking the halls of government, trying to understand what they're doing, or are you walking the halls of industry, figuring out where innovation is, and then telling government this is where, roughly knowing where your limiteds are, and telling them this is where you should be heading, this is where the proverbial hockey puck is going?
Yeah, functionally it's a bit of both. I think if you're only doing the former, you're just very tactical and you're addressing near-term problems. That's something that we can certainly do. I would argue that venture is an expensive way of doing that. If the companies are shovel ready, or this capability can be purchased, there should be an acquisition pathway to do that directly. So I think where we're best suited is kind of that next horizon, which is saying, hey, this is really interesting, but it still needs work and guidance, and that might be technology related, it might be policy related, it might be regulatory. But there's something that needs to be done where our advice and our involvement can actually propel the company to become something that's ready to buy. But to kind of wrap the question, I guess, we get a problem set from all our government partners every year that addresses what they're looking for, not in terms of requirements, but just saying we need a better night vision system, and that might be a radar, that might be an optical, whatever. And we provide a response to that. And then there's always a one-liner that says, and things that we're not aware of that we should be, right? So that's kind of where we really look for fusion or quantum computing and things that are further out 15 years.
And there's another layer to this, and I was just in Silicon Valley, where I split my time, in addition to New York. And there was actually a defense tech component to actually the Plug and Play annual summit, and I stopped in for that. And it was sort of interesting, just trying to understand how innovators, the companies, how can they proactively engage with you and government with their ideas? So Clay, and again, because you've talked about how you're on both, you walk the halls of government, you're in industry yourself, but how do folks, again, approach you? Or approach government?
Yeah, it's evolving, especially in the States and I think across Europe now too, where 10 years ago, if you wanted to get into the intelligence community as a commercial startup, In-Q-Tel was really the vehicle. But now you have, a strategic venture capitalist from Primes, but also there's tons of innovation offices at all the agencies that we support. And so it kind of went through this very kind of scary period of that getting stood up, and you don't know, who's good, who's bad, who's going to help. But now I think governments really understood that there's immense value to be had by engaging with startup technologists. And it's not a nice to have, it's a need to have. And so if you have, a larger group kind of on board, it's less education and more action. And I think that's been really phenomenal. I think the scary part is to, I think we all know our portfolio companies are not reliable. They're not always the safest, and they don't have, product quality where it needs to be for a lot of, critical applications. And so that's where we have to be very careful not to oversell something that falls on the floor and either, poorly performs a mission or doesn't save the life it should.
So it's sort of interesting, and Ali, maybe you can react to this as well. I mean, again, the Ukraine war has just shown us so much in terms of innovation, procurement cycles. Again, the notion that the David and Goliath kind of thing. How do you, as a someone from a major CVC, again, connect with the innovators in market, again, just to keep yourself relevant and on the cutting edge, especially in light of the fact that you have 50,000 engineers already on the team?
Yep.
I mean, are innovators outside your organization as relevant as a financial player or some other CVC that's lighter on engineering?
I'm very relevant. I mean, so we are always part of a syndicate, very much like Incatel. We often do follow-on investments rather than lead. And so we have to partner with the ecosystem, and we get a lot of inbound. I would say of our team of 9 people, we look at maybe 2,500 companies a year. And we're constantly keeping apprised of the latest and greatest technology coming out of the startup ecosystem, but also out of the universities. So Lockheed has great university partnerships with 15 in particular, but we look at the whole university system. We look at the government labs that are constantly churning out new technology. They all have tech transfer offices that we're in constant communication with. And so we act as a bit of a tech scout for the organization to understand where technology is going and to see how we can leverage that and package it into a Lockheed Martin platform. And one of the ways that we're most useful to these startups and these new innovators is having the wherewithal and the knowledge to teach them how to sell into government or how to sell into Lockheed to sell into the government. Because Department of Defense in particular likes to buy big packages. They don't buy widgets, and so you need to sell into somewhere.
And to pick up on that university thread, so if one of your universities, say stateside, is MIT or Stanford, for example, how are you actually, again, working the corridors of the university?
Yeah. So we do have a university partnerships team that has what we call a CRADA. It's Collaborative Research and Development Agreement. Essentially, the university gets government funding and Lockheed pays for its own work to work with these universities to build out technology we're interested in on that future horizon. So things like directed energy, advanced materials, quantum, we work with university partners to build out that technology, and oftentimes that will spin out into a company.
Got it, understood. All right, let me pivot us. I can't actually see how much time we have because there it is. It was behind a plant. Exactly. I knew it would be there somewhere. I just want to now pivot to your portfolio companies, if I could, and talk about challenges that are out there that you've seen. So biggest challenges, flip over to you, Clayton. Biggest challenges that you're seeing your portfolio companies facing. And then, of course, I want to understand how best they've solved for those issues or problems.
Yeah. Well, it obviously depends on the technology, but I think a really great example is we work extremely
close. You have a good data set. How many portcos do you guys have?
800.
800, right? Exactly. Yeah. And you sit on half those boards? No.
Too many. Yeah. It's a full-time job listening, but So in Ukraine, I think it was a very prime example of the opposite of our normal model, where we're very hands-on in ensuring that our government customers are able to test something, they can validate that it works, they can give feedback, they can integrate it closely with their existing APIs and standards, and that's what's required to make it work. And I think at the beginning of the conflict, some of our cybersecurity companies, some of our space companies were very impactful, but for example, our robotics companies, they just kind of dropped a bunch of equipment off at the border and said, good luck, in these kind of care packages. And frankly, those all failed because it might be a very novel platform, but if it has a non-resilient communications backhaul, then it fails regardless of how excellent it might be otherwise. So that was, I think, a fairly big lesson learned for all of kind of Western innovators, was you have to actually be involved, be in the theater, understand how it's used, and train people and develop a true, we call it ConOps, or concept of operations, for how that's going to be used. So that way they don't use it in environments where it won't perform. Or use it in ways that it's likely to not achieve the effect desired. So that's been an evolving thing, and in particular in Ukraine and in Israel, for example, we don't have offices there. So finding partners that we can count on the ground to help the companies get where they need to go have been critical.
Ali, on your side, again, just trying to tease that out a little more in terms of challenges your portcos are facing generally, whether related to the war or not.
Yeah, I would say a lot of the challenges do lie in the consistency of government funding, particularly in the U.S. So anytime the U.S. Congress has to pass a
Wait, what's going on in the U.S.? No. Don't go down that path.
It's all fine. It's all
Exactly.
So anytime the U.S. Congress can't pass a budget, they have to pass a continuing resolution. No new starts can happen. And that means funding that has been approved may not be allocated to a portfolio company. And we've had companies really struggle trying to find runway to support government customers. And so we tend to have to figure out ways to either do bridge rounds or make sure that they have some sort of commercial backbone that can support them through those government funding cycles. And so that's been a big issue, particularly in the last few years.
So I want to just interrupt and just focus on that commercial backbone phrase you use, if I could. Are you, by that, do you mean that they have alternative customers beyond government?
Yes.
Or do you mean something else?
Yes. So we really, very much like In-Q-Tel, we look for companies that have multiple value streams that they can rely upon. So government funding, it may be sticky, but it's not necessarily reliable. And so having another source, a revenue source that is outside the government is very appealing for us, especially if, it's technology that can be applicable in multiple ways. And I know, there is some controversy around this dual use tech phrasing, but really what that means for us is them having the capability to build out their revenue in such a way that they're not necessarily reliant on Lockheed or the government.
And I presume by that you mean, and you're suggesting that dual use is a positive.
Yes.
Right. And would you say the same thing?
100%, yeah.
100%, yeah.
Yeah, I think if you have defensive military tech, then I think your ability to sustain it purely within that vertical is possible, because they'll have to stockpile, they'll have to have all sorts of counter drone systems on borders, these large contracts are, it's whale hunting, right? So they may be delayed 6 months, they may be delayed 12 months. It's very challenging to build a company around that unless you have a substantial amount of cash in the bank to kind of wage you over those humps.
So throughout this conversation, we've interwoven CVC and venture, and I wonder if you're seeing, maybe throw this out to you, Clayton, first, if you're seeing private equity play in this world now more aggressively or in ways they haven't played in the past.
Yeah, I've certainly got a lot more calls to come to offices that are much nicer than mine and have lunch and discuss the topic. I think.
So you go all the way over to Mayfair.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, let me in. It is hard, but I made it. But I think very curious, and a lot of them have been. A lot of these large industrial companies, service into a military market already, or have an automotive customer who also has a defense line of business as well. So in many ways they've been playing, but I think they're certainly taking the European increase in funding to defense, particularly in Germany, 5% GDP is got the attention of the people who look at balance sheets very closely, and I think it's kind of interesting because a lot of these companies are really industrial scale-up challenges. So it's not a traditional place. I guess. More recently, where VC is really focused, they're capex expensive. It's not innovation; it's just automation and excellence. So in a way, a lot of these defense tech plays really are PE styled. They're just not at the budgets that interest PEs yet. But I think probably in the next year or two, we'll see some consolidation and that sort of thing.
Lee, anything on your side on that front?
Yeah, for the last maybe 5 years, I've been moaning and groaning about there's a dearth of capital for that growth stage in defense, right? You see a lot of early stage investors.
By the way, not just defense.
Yeah.
Or the money's out there, they're just it's not being deployed.
Right.
Right.
Right. And it's been a challenge for a lot of defense-focused startups to get to that Series C or Series D, and then just not have a pathway for funding at that point. They either would need to get acquired or they'd need to go public, and they may not be ready for that. And so it's been nice to see new growth stage funds start to enter into defense tech, and we've seen a lot of them, so we're developing those relationships now. I think other mechanisms have also been really interesting. So venture debt has now become a much more interesting pathway for people to fund capital expenses rather than using, high equity, like the high cost of equity to pay for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about the cost of capital. So whichever happens to be less expensive at the moment in time in the economic cycle, and what's more readily available, even if it's more expensive, I suppose, is critical. Especially given our good friends on the venture side of the scheme are not necessarily jumping into investments as readily as they were, unless there's an AI component to what we're talking about. But that's a whole nother session. So I think we're out of time. Is that correct, Charlie? He's nodding graciously, and I hear, we're getting actually from back there to big. So thank you again for joining us. Again, defense tech flavor, but broad application to whatever sector you're in. I hope you found it interesting. Thank you both for joining us, and I'll see you at the reception later tonight that Denton's is hosting with TDK. Thank you.